There's a kind of silence that doesn't scream. It just lingers. It follows you when you wake up in the middle of the night, wondering if you're still seen, still wanted, still enough. Maybe you've spent years trying to be the version of yourself that others would choose, smiling at the right time, saying what you thought they wanted to hear, giving, adapting, shrinking, all in the hope of finally being loved the way you love. But deep down, something always felt off. Like no matter how much you gave, it was never quite enough to make them stay, never enough to make them see you, truly see you. There's a belief many women carry, almost semi-conscious, that being attractive is a performance, that it lives in the right dress, the right laugh, the right body. But what if everything you were taught to chase is the very thing that's keeping you from being found? Louise Hay used to say, "When we really love ourselves, everything in our life works." Not because love magically fixes everything, but because loving yourself is what stops you from constantly trying to be fixed. It's what transforms you from someone who pleases to someone who chooses. A mature woman is not irresistible because she follows a script. She becomes magnetic when she burns the script entirely, when she stops chasing attention and starts embodying presence, when she no longer clings to roles that once defined her, when she finally lets the old version of herself, the one who begged, waited, performed, rest in peace. She no longer seduces through effort. She invites through essence. She doesn't control. She trusts. She doesn't compare. She anchors. And that's why she's unforgettable. Because she's no longer trying to be remembered by someone else. She's too busy remembering herself. Clarissa Pinkola Estes tells us that a woman who has reclaimed her wild soul doesn't need to be desired to feel alive. She already is. Alive in her rhythm. Alive in her silence. Alive in her body that no longer apologizes. There is something undeniably magnetic about a woman who has returned to herself, who no longer fears solitude, who sees the sacred in her own reflection, who realizes that being whole is far more powerful than being wanted. So let me ask you this. What if the most desirable woman is the one who stopped abandoning herself just to be chosen? What if the real seduction is self-loyalty? What if your true beauty, the kind that moves rooms and hearts, isn't something you put on, but something you remember? This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to the woman you were before the world told you to be quieter, smaller, more pleasing. Before you believed that love had to be earned through sacrifice. Before you gave so much that you forgot you were also worthy of receiving. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone. You don't need to be louder to be heard. Irresistibility is not volume. It's vibration. It's the quiet knowing that you are already enough. And today, we begin the journey of remembering, one sacred habit at a time. There's something different about her the moment she enters a room. It's not her outfit. It's not the way she speaks. It's the way the air seems to shift. As if the space itself recognizes that someone fully alive, fully rooted, has just arrived. She doesn't need to announce herself, because her presence already speaks. It whispers something rare. I am home within myself. This is not about arrogance. It's not about control. It's not about demanding space. It's about being space. She no longer lives for the reaction. She no longer bends for approval. What you see is who she is, and what you feel is the result of everything she's healed. This kind of woman no longer looks outward to define her worth. She looks inward and finds a peace that no applause could ever give. Louise Hay once said, "I am in harmony with all of life," and that harmony becomes visible. It radiates, because when a woman is at peace with herself, she no longer performs. She simply is. And that being, that grounded, conscious being, draws more than any mask ever could. She doesn't chase compliments. She doesn't chase validation. She doesn't chase love, because nothing that is real needs to be chased. She knows that energy speaks louder than words, and hers says, "I belong to myself now." There's a strength in her stillness, a gravity in her silence. You don't feel her because she tries. You feel her because she has stopped trying. And in that quiet presence, she becomes unforgettable. She used to say yes, even when her body whispered no. She stayed in conversations that drained her, in rooms that silenced her, in relationships that slowly erased her voice. Not because she didn't know better, but because she had been taught that kindness meant sacrifice, and that love meant endurance. For a long time, she believed that setting limits would make her less lovable. But something shifted. One day, the pain of being unseen became louder than the fear of being alone. And from that day on, she began choosing herself, not loudly, not with rage, but with a quiet dignity that said, "I matter too." Now, her no is not cruel. It's clear. It comes with grace, but it does not bend. It is no longer coded in apologies or second-guessing, because she's learned that guilt is not proof of goodness, and that protecting her energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. There's something magnetic about a woman who no longer betrays herself to be kept. She doesn't explain her boundaries with defensiveness. She honors them with calm, and in doing so, she teaches others how to treat her, without saying a word. She understands now that peace is not about avoiding conflict. It's about avoiding self-abandonment. And every time she honors her truth, something inside her grows stronger, steadier, more whole. There was a time when she feared her own feelings. She thought that if she let them rise, they would drown her. So she held them in, smiled through the ache, kept going, even when her soul begged for pause. She confused emotional depth with emotional chaos, and spent years trying to stay in control, just to feel safe. But control is not the same as clarity. She's since learned that feeling deeply isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and that the true measure of emotional maturity is not in how little you feel, but in how fully you allow yourself to feel, without losing yourself in the process. She no longer labels her sadness as shameful, her tears as inconvenient, or her longing as wrong. Now, when sorrow comes, she doesn't push it away. She makes space for it. When joy visits, she doesn't brace for its end. She breathes it in fully. She understands that emotions are like waves. They rise, they fall, and they pass when we stop resisting them. What once felt overwhelming now feels like sacred information from her inner world. She is vulnerable, but not fragile. Open, but not unguarded. Expressive, but not explosive. And that's the beauty of it. She doesn't dramatize her feelings. She dignifies them. She listens without reacting. She reflects without collapsing. She moves through each emotional season as if it were a teacher, because now she knows it is. There was a time when she waited for an invitation, for permission, for someone to notice her longing and say, "You can go now. You can live." But life kept passing, and no one ever said those words, until one day she realized it was never their job. It was hers. It always had been. Now she doesn't wait to be asked to dance with life. She leads. She creates her own rhythm. She no longer puts her passions on pause or dims her joy out of politeness. She's discovered that desire is not selfish. It's sacred. That her longing to write, to explore, to rest, to be touched deeply, none of it makes her too much. All of it makes her whole. She has rituals that feed her soul, quiet mornings, walks that have no destination, books that hold her like lovers. She plants beauty in the details of her day, in the way she dresses, in the meals she prepares, in the moments she chooses to do nothing but breathe and feel alive. There is a fire in her that no longer needs to be lit from the outside. She doesn't wait to be taken on a journey. She is the journey. This kind of woman doesn't just exist. She lives, with or without company, with or without approval. She lives because her soul deserves to be expressed, not just preserved. She used to speak, hoping to be heard, hoping her words would change someone, soften someone, make someone stay. But her voice always came with a question mark, with the quiet fear of being too much, too emotional, too honest. For years she used her voice to seek reassurance, to prove her worth, to keep peace that was never really peace. Now, she speaks from another place, not from need, from truth. Her words no longer beg, they bless. They don't aim to please. They aim to reflect what's real. She doesn't dress her truth in sweetness to make it easier to digest. She trusts that her truth, spoken with clarity and kindness, is enough. And when silence is the truest thing she can offer, she chooses silence. There is something profoundly magnetic about a woman who is no longer performing when she speaks, who says what she means without harshness, who listens more than she explains, who pauses, not out of insecurity, but out of reverence for her own inner wisdom. Louise Hay taught, "I express myself freely and creatively," and she lives this. Her voice is no longer a tool for survival. It is a vessel of presence. She speaks not to prove her worth, but to inhabit it, not to convince anyone, but to remain aligned with herself. Because when a woman speaks from truth, even in stillness, she is heard. There is a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come with slammed doors or raised voices. It comes quietly, in the slow realization that staying would mean disappearing, that loving someone doesn't always mean you're loved in return, not in the way your soul needs to grow. And so, she gathers her heart, not in anger, but in reverence, and she walks away, not because she stopped caring, but because she started choosing peace. The woman she is now no longer forces herself to fit where there's no room for her truth. She no longer sacrifices her softness to be tolerated. She no longer waits for someone to finally value what they've repeatedly ignored. When the time comes, she leaves, not with bitterness, not with spite, but with clarity. She doesn't burn bridges. She simply stops building where the foundation was never solid. Her goodbye is not loud. It's sacred. It's a return to herself. This kind of ending is not failure. It's freedom. She understands now that sometimes closure doesn't come from the other. It comes from the decision to no longer abandon herself for the sake of being chosen. And in that decision, she reclaims every part of her that love once left behind. Because for her, leaving is no longer about escape. It's about remembrance, a sacred reinicio, a quiet revolution of self-love. Something changed, but not on the outside. The hair, the clothes, the smile, all remained. What shifted was invisible, subtle, deep, a quiet revolution inside her heart. One day, she stopped trying to be someone else's ideal and started honoring who she truly was. And that shift, that inner return, made her luminous. She no longer asks, "Am I enough?" She now whispers, "I already am." And that whisper, felt from the inside out, echoes into the world as presence, as power, as peace. Her magnetism no longer comes from effort. It comes from essence. This woman has faced her shadows. She has held the parts of herself she once disowned. The rage, the sorrow, the longing, the fear. She has stopped running, stopped hiding, and in doing so, she became whole. Now, nothing about her is for show. Everything about her is real. She doesn't need to charm. She doesn't need to convince. She doesn't need to adapt, because who she is finally enough for her. She doesn't sparkle because she wants attention. She glows because she's aligned. She attracts not because she tries to, but because she no longer leaks energy proving her worth. This is the woman who walks into a room and shifts its atmosphere, not by what she does, but by who she has become. If Louise Hay could sit beside you in your quietest moment, the one where you question everything, where you feel like too little or too much, she wouldn't try to fix you. She would remind you that there is nothing broken, that who you are is not a mistake, that every wound has a voice, and every doubt has a root, and none of it defines your worth. She would say, "I now discover how wonderful I am. I choose to love and enjoy myself. Not someday, not when you lose the weight, or heal completely, or find someone who finally sees you, but now, in this breath, in this body, in this version of you, raw, real, in progress." Louise wouldn't tell you to chase love. She'd guide you back to the mirror. She'd remind you that every time you've begged for value, you were already sacred, that your reflection doesn't ask for permission to be beautiful, it simply is. She'd help you hear the voice beneath the noise, the one that already knows, the one that says, "I am allowed to exist as I am." And she'd gently place your hand on your heart and say, "You don't have to do more to deserve love. You just have to stop forgetting that you already are love." Because true magnetism isn't about being wanted. It's about wanting yourself, fully, fiercely, and without delay. Louise Hay once said, "I love and approve of myself. That is enough." And perhaps, after everything, that is the most sacred truth a woman can carry. Not as a mantra, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. A deep knowing that pulses beneath every word she speaks, every boundary she sets, every step she takes toward herself. Clarissa Pinkola Estes reminds us that the irresistible woman is the one who has not forgotten who she is in her most wild, intuitive, untamed form. She is not loud, but she is thunder in stillness. She is not desperate, but she is deeply open. She is not seeking, because she already found something far more precious, herself. This woman doesn't need to prove her worth. She embodies it. She doesn't need to be chosen to feel valuable, because her value was never up for debate. She is whole. Not because someone stayed, but because she finally did. And the truth is, the most unforgettable woman is the one who no longer tries to be remembered, because her presence, calm, clear, complete, leaves an imprint, not because she forced it, but because she became it. She doesn't shout to be heard. She listens. She listens to herself, and in that quiet intimacy with her own being, She rises, not above others, but into herself. And that, more than beauty, more than charm, more than any technique, is what makes her magnetic. So if you've ever felt invisible, know this: you were never unseen. You were simply waiting to see yourself first. And the moment you do, the moment you truly return to yourself, the world begins to mirror that return, because you are the frequency, and everything else tunes to you. If this message touched a part of your soul that's been waiting to be seen, I invite you to subscribe, to stay close, to walk this path with us. And if you're ready to go even deeper, there's another video waiting for you right here on the screen, a continuation of this journey back to your truest, brightest self. Click, and I'll meet you there.